Hi guys, greetings from Bulgaria. We are ready for the 8th video of our Selenium 4 series. As you know, usually the beginnings of our videos, sometimes I have personal messages to you to establish a deeper connection. So I have something to say really quick. Last week I was nominated to be included in a short list of most influential IT people in Bulgaria. And there were many people bragging about it to be in the list. Of course, I'm honored to be there. However, I realized that I wasn't to be so successful or good at what I'm doing without the help of many people during the years. So I used the occasion of the nomination to personally prize them and for the mentorship and influence over me. And as you know, in IT, we get good salaries. And especially right now, salaries are rising and many people care much more about money. I have teach and mentor lots of people, worked on many projects, and I can say that, yes, money are important, but definitely many often they're more important stuff at work, a good mentor, very good collective or team and spirit. And when your boss is treating you not very well and there isn't anyone to help you or warn you something, money cannot solve it, nor all of the social benefits that modern companies provide, right? So please say more often thank you to your mentors and appreciate your team. It is not something that happens magically, but someone puts a lot of effort to happen. Yeah, this was, I was going to be short. It wasn't. Anyway, let's start. So let me share my screen. Until now, we talked in the last 7 videos about Selenium 4. First, how to upgrade to Selenium from Selenium 3 to Selenium 4. Then we talked about the new relative headers and how you can use them. In the 3rd video, I showed you how you can use the pin script and initialize script to highlight elements, to display notifications, especially even in the cloud, because already the Lambda Test Cloud and other clouds support Selenium 4 and the developer tools and bidirectional APIs. Then in short, we looked into Selenium IDE, how you can use it even in more complex scenarios using JavaScript to set up data and so on. Then we had a really deep dive into geolocation testing, localization testing, and others. We talked about responsive testing. And in the last video, we talked about troubleshooting tests. So if you missed some of the videos, you can return and rewatch them. They are really interesting and insightful, I hope, for you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the ring bell so that you get notified about new videos each week. There are a couple of new videos on the channel, and it became one of my favorites channel about technical education. Also, don't miss the blog because there on many of the topics that we talk about here, they are really detailed articles. And what about today? Today, we're going to talk about network traffic using, you will see, there are many topics that we're going to talk about more advanced, like how we can intercept requests and modify them, how we can mock API calls. We will talk about basic authentication, how you can use WebSockets, and what are the event source messages. And last but not least, I'm going to show you how you can capture the event traffic and analyze it, and even how you can find out whether some of the requests came from the cache or not, or even how to disable the cache. So many new stuff right now. Of course, as always, you can download the full source code. You will find a link to the GitHub repo. You can clone it, you can play it. It's open source, everything. And in the end of the video, if you have some questions, you can ask them directly in the comments or write me on LinkedIn. So I have created a new module here. It's called Chapter 8, CDP Capture Traffic. The setup is pretty, it's almost identical to what we have before. I have two Java files. One of them is running directly on my machine on local browsers, and later I'm going to show you how you can run these CDP commands in the cloud. So the first thing that I wanted to show you is related to basic authentication, something new added to Selenium 4 and the CDP. Maybe I can show you one website. It's really basic. It's just when you navigate to this URL, it will pop up this alert so that you can enter your username and password. And just in short, what is the HTTP basic authentication? It's the most basic implementation. Is the simplest technique for enforcing access control to web resources, because it doesn't require cookies, session identifiers, or login pages. Rather, HTTP basic authentication uses the standard fields in the HTTP header. And by the way, something interesting, it was originally implemented at CERN in Switzerland in 1993, and it was defined in the HTTP version 1 specification in 1996. So in order, in your test to skip this authentication alerts, the thing that you can do right now in Selenium 4 is that you can first cast the driver to case authentication. This is specific interface. And then this interface provides this register method that accepts a predicate. Basically, the predicate is something that returns a Boolean result. It's like anonymous method, right? So I declare it here as a lambda, but again, you can directly provide it here. I just wanted to make the code a little bit shorter. If you hover, you will see that this register method accepts a predicate or a lambda expression. In our lambda expression, I'm just saying if the URL contains HTTP bin, because it was part of the URL, then please use this username and password, and we use this of static factory method to provide the username and the password. Then when I navigate, I'm already authenticated, and I check the source to check that the authenticated true is there. That's it. Pretty simple. You can find it again in the Selenium documentation for the Java bindings. The next thing that I wanted to show you is many often we need to modify a little bit the traffic. And now it's pretty easy with the bidirectional APIs. Again, there is a difference between CDP and bidirectional APIs. CDP is available right now only for Chromium engine. This means Edge and Chrome, while the bidirectional APIs in Selenium try to cover all of the browser vendors and to be part of the WebDriver protocol, the W3C. So in the bidirectional APIs, there is this network interceptor class that accepts the driver, and here they use this fluent API. Fluent means chaining methods like this. It's similar to the API for actions like drag and drop. And here we say, please catch all of the requests and then provide this response. I'm setting the status to 200, and then I'm modifying the content of the page to you have been hacked, but you can change it to whatever you want. The most interesting part for me was the thing that I used in some projects is to add headers to some requests. For example, you can change the encoding and to mark the request to require to be compressed. to include gzip compression, right? Sometimes we have to test this stuff to see whether they work or not, especially when your website is hosting more than one server and you have a load balancer, and you have to check whether this is working properly, especially if your developers created the compression. So yeah, pretty easy. You just have many different options here in the API. Header, set status, set content, set target code. You can remove attributes, headers, many stuff if you want to intercept and change the traffic. The next thing that I want to show is something that I wrote about in my books about design patterns. It's an interesting pattern. It's called black hole pattern. And the idea of the black hole pattern, actually the full name is black hole proxy pattern, because we use like a proxy. In our case, this will be the CDP DevTools. So this pattern tries to reduce the test instability by getting rid of many third-party uncertainties as possible. For example, modern websites have lots of third-party content loaded on every page. There are social networking buttons, images coming from CDNs, tracking pixels, analytics, and much more. And all these items can destabilize our tests at any point. And the black hole proxy takes all the HTTP requests going to third-party websites and block them. And as if the request was sucked into a black hole, right? Our website integrates with a couple of third-party user tracking services that collect analytics data and use others to download the fonts. And we may not need to test these services in all of our tests, right? So we can use the black hole proxy approach to block them. So how you can do that? So first, we get, again, we need to cast the driver to this interface has DevTools, especially if you use the generic WebDriver interface. If you use the Chrome driver or Edge driver, you don't need to do the cast. Then we get the DevTools, we create a session. One more interesting new stuff. If you want, especially in many occasions when we use test environments, we don't have security certificates installed on the browser for the particular website. And thus, the website sometimes is blocking the content of the website. In order to mitigate this issue, one way to do it is to put some, options, Chrome options or others for the driver. Another more generic way, if you need to do it only for a particular test, is to use DevTools, and you can send this command: DevTools send security sake to ignore certificate errors, and this will ignore all of these screens that block the website because of that. Of course, when you test production sites or before deploying to production, it's not suggested to use it because you need the certificates. But especially for QA environments, before that, it's fine. Now, I'm going to show you two ways how you can block different resources. The first thing for all of the examples that I'm going to show you is that you need to enable the network CDP domain. And you need to send this command, send network enable, and I know it's pretty bad, this API for the CDP sometimes, but you need to provide this optional empty stuff. And then you need to send another command, network set block URLs. And here you can use regex expressions. Basically, I'm saying, please block. I'm creating a list with this factory method of to block all of PNGs and all CSS. And then we can add additional listeners What are the listeners? Basically, these are events that are happening, and you can execute particular logic there. And this method here inside anonymous method, this loading field, it's a static method come from network. For now, you can just import it as a static method. If we check here, we will see I have many different stuff that I added here. Here it is. We add all of this import static network, and we say dot star, which means that I'm going to import all of these static methods, in this case, loading field. And basically, I'm going to verify that I'm going to get the type of the field to lock resource, and I'm going to check that it's a style sheet, a CSS style sheet, and then that it's an image, because this is what we blocked, right? This is just to verify that my logic is working. Another way is that if you want to block a particular URLs, you can do as well. Just provide a list of few full URLs instead of using the star dot notation. And then again, you can print it. You can print the or check the blocked reason. It's up to you. This was about the black hole pattern. I think you will find it useful in some cases. Another thing that it's pretty awesome that they added it and that we have it when we use the CDP is if we need to mock API calls. What does this mean? Many often in modern web applications, in order to be, fast and to be more responsive, the different components, for example, grids, tables, etc., they're making API calls to some web APIs. Also, when we have payment providers like PayPal or CyberSource or others, they also make client-side requests. However, sometimes they're a bit hard, especially the payment providers and similar services, they're a bit hard to test. And especially if you don't have, I can give you an example from one of the projects before that I worked. We had this, in this case, we use CyberSource. And in order the CyberSource to calculate all of the taxes that we need to pay on the shopping cart, they return the percentages of these calculations. And this happened, and this works pretty well on production. However, at some point on their test environment, they make it so that in order to, they just return random values in order to spare server resources. And basically the thing that we had to do is to create a mock API for our test environment in order our test to pass. Otherwise, basically you cannot check that all the calculations in the shopping cart are working properly. And this is why these mock API calls are really much easier way for doing so. In our case, before, like years ago, we had to change the production code in configuration files to check whether we're on the test environment, and if we were on a test environment, to use the mock APIs, etc. But again, as you can imagine, this is a really hard process to make developers change all of this, and it's hard. This is why it's much easier to use the new capabilities of CDP, to make these mock API calls. And I'm going to show you a really nice example for doing so. I found here one of the most famous, components like grids, and basically developers get these components and put them into their websites, and this is working client side. Basically, all of the data is not fetched from the page, but they use API for doing so. For example, here they use this OData service to return the data for all of the orders, and then this is bind together to the grid. How this works? Maybe we can view the source. This is, as you can see, this is the Kendo component, and they bind it like this to the grid. And basically in this code, they create the columns, etc. This is not so important. The important part here is that basically in my test, the thing that I'm doing, I'm just making a slight modification. You can change directly the whole URL and bind another, another mocking API if you wish. For example, if you're QA, in my past projects, I just created another version of with back data about what this is returning, and I just change the URLs. In our case, the thing that I'm going to change is how many rows here we are returning, and this is something that I can change in the OData service. And here is how it works. This time we won't use the network command. Instead, we are going to use fetch. Again, if you remember, you can check all of the CDP commands on their GitHub IO documentation and find out what are the arguments. In this case, we're going to, at the listener, we're going to, with the fetch command, request paused. We're going to pause the request, and then we're going to check if this is the URL or whatever contains or equals, we are going to modify it. And as you can see in this case, in the request, I'm replacing some parts of the URL requests. How you can check this? Well, here, if we turn on the DevTools, the network, and if I refresh, and we can search for the data. Let me see. Here it is. Here you can see the OData call that we're basically OData gives you to make like similar to SQL queries, but using the URL syntax. As you can see here, I'm saying, please give me all pages in particular format and give me the top 20 results. And the thing that I'm going to change here is that instead of top 20, I'm going to say that I want top 5. And when I run the test, basically only the 5 results will be shown. But as you can guess, I can do whatever modifications I want to the data here, even if I don't change it. I can add other where clauses, etc., filters. And then the next thing that I need to do is I sent another command that I'm saying send fetch continue request with this request ID, and I provide as optional the mock URL. Otherwise, we're just continuing the requests. And this is how this works. Basically, as I said, you can directly change the whole URL or just modify it or modify the, for example, the post data. This is fine as well. So this is about the mocking APIs. Now, another interesting topic is about capturing HTTP data, HTTP traffic. We already discussed how you can just intercept the requests and then just make slight modifications to them, right? And yeah, basically, again, in a similar manner, you're creating the session, and then again, we need to enable the network. And then the next thing that I need to do is, as you can see here, I'm creating a list of responses, of all of the responses that are captured during the loading of my page. However, please be careful about this syntax here. this is a specialized list that it's concurrent list, meaning that it's a special collection for multi-threaded code, meaning that when we push data to it from many parallel processes, it won't cause any deadlocks. Otherwise, if you use a normal list, probably you will have some exceptions and problems. And this is required because when you load a page, many of the requests are happening at the same time in parallel. And I just added another listener, DevTools at listener, and this listener comes from the network. It's basically network response received. And when we capture and save in this collection of the responses, later on, we can analyze the responses and make assertions to them. And I have added here 4 different assertion methods. For example, we can assert that there are no error codes inside this collection. Here I'm using, of course, you can do it with for each statement and then some if conditions. However, it's much simpler to use the Stream API. The Stream API just gives you some helper methods. For example, here I check that whether all of the requests have status over 400 and below 599. And if we, for example, this is false, then I'm going to display this error message. And again, the same thing here, I can check whether a particular request was made. This is a little bit tricky because sometimes you may need to capture not only the responses, but also the requests, because in many cases, depending on what you need to verify, the request URL will be different to the response URL. And this happens because of some server-side redirections or CDNs, etc. So you need to be careful when you want to check whether a particular request was made. This is just to show you how we can do it. Again, we use the Stream API, and I'm checking that some parts of the URL are part of the collection. Same I'm just inverting the condition here for request not made. And another interesting assertion is for checking that there are no large images requested. So here I'm checking that the type of the request, resource type, is image. Then I'm checking into the headers that the content length is below particular value. And again, I'm displaying some meaningful message in case of failure. So this is about the capturing HTTP traffic. Before talking about sockets and event source messages because they're connected, I'm going to show you something else really interesting. When you serve requests from the cache, as you know, this is optimization. Optimization techniques of the websites and the browsers to load faster. They store particular resources on the hard drive or in the memory so that they can not download them every time. And you can, for example, depending on your server, for sure you can stop the caching. Many often on particular test environments, we stop the cache. And in our the projects that we're working on right now, many often there are problems related to the cache, and you want to be able to directly interact with it and turn it on and off and check whether the resources came from it. So now you can do that with the new Selenium 4 tools. You can enable again the network. There are 4 interesting methods. The first one is you can disable or enable the cache using the network set cache disabled. Also, you can clear the browser cache, or you can clear the cookies. of course, probably you don't need to use this method for clearing the cookies because you can do it directly with WebDriver, but you cannot do the same for the cache. Before in Chrome, there were certain methods for that, but a part of them were deprecated. So I suggest you to use the DevTools for that. Probably in future, I hope that they will add all of this to the BiDirectional APIs. For now, again, it's working only for Chromium. The interesting part here is that you can use in combination with the thing that I showed you about the capturing HTTP traffic, the responses and the requests, is that you have another listener that basically you can say, please call this code when a request is served from the cache. Again, depending on the pretty complex rules that you set or your admin set on your server, the cache may work for all of the resources or not for all of them. So this is really helpful to check that all of these rules are met depending on your needs. However, basically this cache request is just a request ID. So as I said, probably you need to have two listeners, one capturing everything inside these responses, and later in the analyzation phase, you can map and find the captured responses or requests based on this request ID here, and then make particular assumptions whether something worked or not. Now, another really interesting thing that we can do with DevTools is related to WebSocket operations. First, what are the WebSockets? I prepared an example for you. Here, this is a simple WebSocket, like a test website. So WebSocket is a next generation bidirectional communication technology for web applications that operates over a single socket, and it's exposed via JavaScript interface in HTML5 compliant browsers. It makes it possible to open two-way interactive communication session between user browser and the server. And with this API, you can send messages to a server and receive event-driven responses without calling the server for a reply. And many modern chat applications, for example, WhatsApp, Viber, and multiplayer games uses underneath WebSockets to operate. So we need to be able to work with them, right? So again, DevTools gives you this possibility. We need to enable the network, and then you have a couple of listeners that can help you. For example, when we create the socket connection, we can find the URL of the initiator and the line number. When we receive a frame or a message, we can get the message here, the code, the mask, whether it's received. We can also receive error messages and when everything is closed. For now, I just print them here on the console that everything was received or not. I'm not going to use time now to show you, but basically we're receiving all of these messages here, and we can assert them and we can check them, and you can simulate something inside these games or chat applications, which is pretty awesome. Another thing that I wanted to show you is another similar, technology. It's called event source messages. And I have another example for you. It's here from W3 Schools. On wide WebSockets, these event source messages, or sometimes they're called server sent events or one-way messaging, are indirectional. These data messages are delivered in one direction from the server to the client, or basically the browser. And you can use them when there is no need to send data from the client to the server in message form. For example, event source messages are excellent for handling social media status updates, news feeds, delivering data into client-side storage mechanisms like index database or web storage. And as you can see, if we refresh, this is something that comes from the server. And with the WebDriver code, we can receive these messages and do something with them. In order to work with them, again, it's pretty identical to what we do in the WebSockets. Basically, you just enable the network, then you have this event source messages received. Again, because it's one directional, we don't have another listener like messages sent. And we can get the event data, the event name, and the data itself, and we can verify it. Pretty awesome. And lastly, if you need to, again, the examples that I showed you, they were working on my local browser, but now nothing stops you to use all of this in the cloud, in the public cloud, such as Lambda test. Again, similar to what we did in the previous chapters, the only thing that you need to do in the case of Lambda test is that you need to enable the CDP using this flag here. You need to mention that you need to use the Selenium 4. Another important step is to initialize this augmenter. This is basically the class that it's going to add the CDP interface to the driver, to the remote driver itself. This is why you need to call the augmented driver here. And then after that, the tests are completely identical to what you saw before. And probably, especially when you need to work with network traffic, this is basically the easiest way for you to do it. Because otherwise, in the past, when we didn't have possibility to use CDP in the cloud, and we needed to use proxies in our code in Java or C# or whatever, it was extremely hard to use these proxy-based tests in Selenium Grid. For example, in the public clouds, we had to establish like a protected tunnel to the machine. However, this is a bit slow, and there are always tips and tricks there about the proxies that sometimes they're working well, sometimes not. So for sure, this thing with the CDP is much better, especially if it's working for your particular case. I hope that this deep dive into the network traffic work together with BiDirectional APIs and the CDP was helpful to you, and you learned some new things. In the next video from the series, from the Selenium 4 course, we are going to talk about how you can capture performance metrics using the bidirectional and CDP protocols, and how you can use it to analyze the performance of the website, how we can find memory leaks, and many other exciting stuff and possibilities with the Selenium 4. Thank you for watching. I hope that it was useful to you. If you have any comments, you can post them directly in the comments under the video, or you can always write on LinkedIn. Again, check the blog of Lambda test. There are many awesome articles about many of the stuff that we're talking about here. You can check their community, and also don't forget to get your certification about WebDriver, JUnits, and many more. Check lambdatest.com certifications. See you soon in the next video. Take care.